We are live. Oh, no. Now we are live. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I am Lee Eck, Vice Chair of the City of Albany Industrial Development Agency. We'll open up the board meeting for Thursday, January 19th. We'll start with a roll call and reading and approval of the minutes of the regular board meeting of December 15th, 2022. I don't know if we want to announce who's missing. We'll just put that on the roll.
We can note that everyone's present except for Chair Elizabeth Staubach and John Maxwell.
Okay. And as the meetings of this meeting has also, the minutes of the meeting have also been previously distributed, if I could get a motion to dispense with the reading and accept them as read, or as accepted.
So moved.
Take a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you very much. Now, we actually will have a report of the Chief Financial Officer, and now we'll turn it over to Tom.
Great, thank you. I'm happy to welcome Tom Libertucci from BST, who is going to present on the financials.
Yes, within your packet is the monthly unrestricted cash position. For the month of December, we did earn interest of $2,105 on our holdings. Our expenses, there was a $49,000 expense to CBRE, and the income that we had this month was from 760 Broadway. And if you have any questions, please let me know. Nope.
Okay, thank you very much. If there are no questions, can we get a motion to accept the report as read?
No.
Okay, all right, we'll just move on. Moving on to unfinished business, there is none listed unless anybody has anything. Seeing none, we'll move on to new business, and we'll start with the annual housekeeping resolution for 2023. And
Sure. In the packets, this is our annual housekeeping resolution. This covers officers of the corporation, professional service agreements that the corporation engages in various committee assignments, as well as sort of a reaffirmation of the policies of the corporation. I'm going to just quickly turn it over to Joe Scott if there's anything additional that should be added.
No, I don't have anything more, Tom. Again, as you indicated, this is an annual activity by the IDA. It's a good practice. It sets you up for the upcoming calendar year, makes the various appointments, as you indicated, and the Schedule A is where all the information is outlined and described. And with that, I'll open it up for any comments or questions.
None here.
seeing no questions, can we go right to the resolution?
I'll make the motion.
And so I'll read this. So we have a resolution approving certain appointments and administrative matters of the agency. And can I get a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None, motion carries. Now we can go to presentation of the annual investment report.
Sure. As was presented to the Finance Committee last week, in your packets is a copy of the annual investment report with the bank accounts of the corporation and the interest earned, which totaled approximately $23,000.
And we don't need a motion. Do we have any discussion, any questions?
Interest rates are going up.
So we can move on to item C, the property acquisition and disposition report.
In accordance with the bylaws and as was reported on at the Finance Committee last week, enclosed is a real property report. The big change from this year was the addition of the properties acquired as part of the Liberty Park project.
Thank you, Tom. And finally, we can move on to market studies presentation.
Great. So we have some guests today. First, we have Lori Volk from Zimmerman Volk Associates, who is joining us via Zoom. And we can put that up on the screen in a minute. But as the board knows, we had retained Zimmerman Volk Associates to help us with a residential market study, kind of updating projections for the residential market throughout the city, and then also with a focus on downtown. Following Lori's presentation, we do have Eric Simons and Kyle from CBRE here with us today, who prepared a very detailed report on the kind of commercial, retail, industrial, office markets. So we'll be going through that after the presentation from Lori Volk. So with that, Sarah,
I do want to set the stage a little bit, and because it's been a few months since we had done the solicitation, and both teams have been working really hard on making sure that we have the best information available to us. This effort is really twofold. First and foremost, it's coming because we are looking to refresh the project evaluation and assistance framework, as you all know, and so this information will be invaluable to the agency as we really dive into project finances and really understanding what's necessary to make good projects work here at the IDA. So we'll be using all of this information directly over the next several months as we engage our next professional services firm, WZHA, to help us build out the new pilot schedules and really look as the governance committee is looking at the scoring framework for how to make projects work here. The second reason for having these professionals really diving into the local market is because things have changed quite a bit. And that's why we need it for the project evaluation assistance framework. But we're also in a very different world than we were 5 years ago. We're in a very different world than we were 3 years ago. And so we want to make sure that our market assumptions are updated and as accurate as they can be to reflect current conditions coming out of COVID, entering into what is looking like a recession period, so that as we're making decisions, both here at the IDA and just about economic development in general, we know what's happening here regionally and what to expect and what to plan for. So just using that as sort of your frame of reference as you're hearing these presentations. I know you've received copies of the reports, both from Lori and from the CBRE team. So come with questions, but also come with the perspective of how are we going to change operations to meet what you're hearing from both of these groups.
great. Lori?
Yes.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to your presentation.
Is it up on the screen by any chance?
We just have your Zoom window up there. We can put the report up on the screen if that's helpful.
It should have been up there. Hold on a second. I've always had trouble with Zoom and trying to get it onto the screen. Is it there now?
It's not. Do we have?
Okay. Yeah, maybe you don't have the shared screen on yet.
It looks like we do. So if you want to try.
Okay. I'll try it again.
And we can also just pull up a copy here. We're having.
I know here my screen share is loading. I'm sorry about that. Okay, that should do it, right?
Yes.
All right. All right. Well, I'm delighted to be here today. Sorry I couldn't be in Albany. I do love the city. It's got a lot of connections to New York, and I'm here in Brooklyn today. As you know, we are presenting the findings of our analysis of multifamily residential real estate, both citywide and for the downtown subdistrict. Now, the study tasks that we are charged with are really trying to understand what current multifamily market conditions, although that's a moving target, as you know. And at the time that we did the study, to understand what the rents prices, unit sizes were, how absorption and occupancy was going, and who is currently living in the downtown sub-district. We were also asked to describe who the target markets are for new multifamily housing in the city, what their housing preferences are, and importantly, what their financial capabilities are. And in that regard, we are to forecast multifamily, both rental and for sale, absorption over the next 5 years. We also then determined what the optimum market position for new housing in downtown sub-district for multifamily, rental and for sale in the downtown sub-district. So that's what I'm going to be presenting to you today. First, just a slight clarification about our methodology. We look at market potential, not demand. And our findings are from the consumer perspective and not the developer. We learned to do that quite some time ago because we found that if you reflect what the developer wants, it may be quite different from what the market wants and can afford. So our methodology is based on market potential, which comes from the fact that in every market area, every year, households are moving from one unit to another. And if you can actually understand who those households are, how many there are, where they are in their life stage, what their housing preferences are, and what their financial capabilities are, you can create a residential market position that will correspond to those characteristics and be successful. So the first thing for us to understand is how many households have the potential to move within or to the city of Albany each year over the next 5 years. And we look at households of all incomes. We weren't looking just at market rate. We were looking at households of all incomes. And what we do is we get data from the Internal Revenue Service. And as you know, if you move in a given year, you have to report it on your tax return. And the IRS compiles all that data on a county basis. And we get the most recent 5 years to understand what the history of mobility and migration has been. And we understand through that what the counties are that are the primary counties of households moving into Albany. To understand the city's mobility, we use American Community Survey data. And we found that these are very, very powerful indicators of mobility in and around a study area. And from that analysis, we found that nearly 10,200 households of all incomes represent the annual potential market each year over the next 5 years for the city of Albany. And how many of those households would be likely to either rent or buy multifamily housing anywhere in the city? When we looked at just multifamily housing, eliminating townhouses and single family detached, we were left with about 6,200 households of all incomes each year over the next 5 years. Then we wanted to understand what their tenure propensities were. Are these renters or are they potential owners of multifamily units? And based on the aggregated preferences of those 6,200 households, potential renters make up 90% of them, and potential condominium buyers represent approximately 10%. So who are those households that represent the annual potential market for the city as a whole? And younger singles and couples make up about 70% of that market, families with children about 19% of that market, and empty nesters and retirees 11%. You may wonder about the predominance of younger singles and couples in your annual potential market. First, you have a lot of younger singles and couples already living in the city because of universities and the work opportunities that are here. And the percentage of 1- and 2-person households in the city of Albany is approximately 72%. Now, that means that there aren't that many families with children living in the city. So the target market is only 19% of families with children. Older households are 11%, and they tend to move less frequently than families and young people. because they generally really love the neighborhoods they're living in, and it's difficult to make that move. So how much would those households be likely to pay? Now, we can't determine an optimum market position for a citywide analysis because the range of rents and prices would be so different depending upon what neighborhood or what study area we're talking about. But for the nearly 5,600 annual potential multifamily renters over the next 5 years, approximately 29% have incomes below 30% of the AMI. Now, what's 30% of the AMI? That is about $22,300 for a single person household, $25,450 for a two-person household, and that's the majority of the market. And then for four-person households, which is probably the largest household size that represents your annual potential market, it's $31,800. Now, all of these have different income levels, but certainly at 100% AMI and up, of which 25% of the market has those incomes, for a single person household, that income level is $44,500. For a two-person household, that income level is $50,900. And for a four-person household, that income level is $106,000. Sorry, I was reading the 60%. For a single person household at 100% AMI is $74,200. Two-person household at 100% AMI is $84,800, and a four-person household is $106,000. So you can see there is a lot of need for affordable units, but there's also a lot of need for market rate. The income ranges of the 595 annual potential condominium buyers are skewed towards the more affluent for a lot of reasons. And this has changed somewhat over this past few years because of the rising interest rates that limit the market, that limit the number of households that can afford a down payment. And typically a down payment on this condo is much higher than down payments on single family houses or townhouses. So what would be the alternative? What are the kinds of choices? What is the current context in the city of Albany in terms of the number of rental properties, rents and prices, and the number of condominiums? In terms of affordable housing units, there are currently 38 rental properties providing over 5,000 units that are, generally speaking, affordable to public housing residents or to households with incomes at or below 60% AMI. And another 11 properties, which will contain about 1,100 units, are in some stage of development. In terms of market rate rentals, there are currently 86 larger rental properties throughout the city of Albany, and they provide 4,500 new units. And there are another 15 properties which will provide another 1,400 units that are currently in various stages of planning and development. Currently, as of the end of last year, market rate rents ranged between $800 to $4,000 per month. And that worked out to about $92 to $3.53 per square foot. However, most of the more recently built rental properties in the city have rents per square foot ranging from the high $1, like $1.95, to the low twos, up to say $2.40 a square foot. In terms of condominiums, there are 17 existing condominium buildings which have about 316 units, and the condominium resale prices, of which there were very few at the time we did our analysis, they range between about $679,000 to almost $450,000. So it's important to understand what the absorption of new multifamily units can be over the next 5 years. And we use capture rates of the annual potential market to help understand what that absorption could be. And in terms of rental multifamily units, new ones, we believe that the market can capture 15 to 20% of that annual number of rental multifamily households, and 10 to 15% of the annual condominium potential buyers. That means that over the next several years, there could be another 450 to 600 affordable rental apartments and nearly 400 to over 520 market rate rental apartments. That's over the next 5 years. Same with the condominiums, excuse me, in terms of the affordable condominiums, 27 to 41 each year over the next 5 years, and market rate condominiums, 32 to 49 over the next 5 years. That means that after 5 years, there could be, if you can actually meet those capture rates, approximately 4,200 to 5,600 new mixed income rental units in the city, and another 295 to 450 new mixed income condo units in the city. And that would do quite a bit to adding density to your city. Now, specifically, the downtown subdistrict, you see the map here, is a fairly small area, and it's surrounded by very urban neighborhoods that feel like downtown. So how many of those citywide households actually have the potential to move to the downtown subdistrict as opposed to other neighborhoods in the city? And we have determined that using our same methodology, that over 5,100 households of all incomes represent the potential market for new housing units and existing housing units in the downtown subdistrict, of which about 3,500 of them would be the market for rental or rental multifamily or condominiums, specifically in the downtown subdistrict. So what are their tenure propensities? How many of them would look for rentals and how many for condominiums? We have an even higher percentage of rental units in the downtown. 93% of the market would prefer rentals, and 7% of the market would represent condo buyers. And who are those households? Well, younger singles and couples are, again, the majority of the market at about 76%. Empty nesters and retirees are a higher percentage of the market for downtown than they are citywide, because lots of older couples who do decide to leave their house and their neighborhood choose to move to downtown, where they think there's much more accessibility to the places that they want to go to and are able to walk. The walkability of many Albany neighborhoods is, I think, a real plus for the city, but it's particularly pronounced in downtowns and in-town neighborhoods. And families with older children represent approximately 10% of that annual potential market. So how much are these households likely to pay? And here we were able to divide them based on annual incomes at or above 60% AMI. And again, 60% AMI for a single person household is $44,500, up to $63,000 for a 4-person household. That is the minimum income that we looked at when we developed these rent ranges. So from here, what we did then was calculate that each of the households in that annual potential renter market would only spend 30% of their annual income on rent and utilities. Now, more and more publications are studying this issue, and particularly with rentals, it's quite clear that many, many households, particularly less affluent ones, pay much more than 30%. But we feel, along with HUD, that 30% is a reasonable amount to pay. And that's what we've calculated then, what each of these households could pay. And that's where they fall then on the spectrum of rents, ranging from $1,000 to over $3,000 a month. And because of the predominance of young people, as you would expect, the most expensive units from $2,250 and up are also the smallest annual potential market. But there's a very, very strong market of units available and new units that could be priced between $1,500 and $2,250. That represents essentially half of the market. So that seems to be where a lot of the newer properties have been positioned. And in terms of condominium prices, there are 145 annual potential condominium buyers with incomes at or above 60% AMI. And here we have fewer younger households that represent the potential market. And this is where most of the empty nesters and retirees find themselves, and they tend to fall in the higher incomes. So you see that the most prevalent in price range based on each household not paying more than 30% of their annual income on mortgage and utilities and taxes. The strongest area is from $275 to $350. Now, a year ago, this would skew even higher, but because interest rates now have gone up to about 6 or 7%, depending upon where you are, it has obviously reduced the buying capacity of many households, both in terms of assembling the down payment and also being able to afford what that mortgage payment is at the much higher interest rates. So what should the rents and prices be to attract households to the downtown subdistrict? In terms of multifamily rents, and this is as of 2022, affordable rents for 1 to 3 bedrooms should range between $1,000 and $1,800 a month for units, 1 to 3 bedroom units ranging in size from 600 to 1,350 square feet, which works out to $1.33 to $1.69 a square foot. And market rate rents for studios to 3 bedroom units would start at $1,525 and go up to $3,200 a month for 500 square foot studios to 1,650 square foot 3 bedroom units. And that works out to $1.93 to $3.05 a square foot. And in terms of condominiums, 1 bedroom, 2 bath affordable units would be priced between $175 and $215 for 1 and 2 bedroom units, 800 to 1,200 square feet, and $179 to $219 a square foot. And market rate condos, 1 to 3 bedrooms, ranging in price between $275 and $450. Again, 1 bedroom to 3 bedroom units, 800 to 1,800 square feet, and $250 to $344 a square foot. So what would be the forecast absorption for new multifamily units in the downtown? Here we use the capture rates of 10 to 12% of the annual potential market of both renters and condo buyers, which means that each year, 36 to 54 affordable rental units could be absorbed and 112 to 168 market rate rentals, 3 to 4 affordable condos, and 12 to 18 market rate condominiums, which over 5 years would come to an additional 740 to 1,110 new rental units in the downtown and 75 to 110 new condominium units in the downtown. Now that represents less than 25% of the market for the citywide rental units and about 20 to 25% of the annual market for new condominiums. So it is a very vital market, particularly multifamily rental, which is something that we have been seeing all across the country. And even in recessions, rental markets tend to hold up a lot better than for sale product, because as interest rates go up, the number of buyers go down. So we are quite optimistic about Albany's future over the next 5 years. And now, any questions?
I'd start, Lori. Hi, it's Sarah. Thank you so much for this. It's incredibly valuable information. And, we've had you here over the years on a number of occasions, both the downtown market and the citywide market. Can you talk a little bit about that trajectory and sort of what you've been seeing over time here in Albany with your long experience with us here?
Yeah, our first study was in downtown, and that was in the early 90s. And the market was clearly much softer. There were very few existing properties of any sort in and around the downtown. And most of the rental development was near the university. So there was a lot of skepticism at that time, and not just in Albany, but across the country, about the viability of downtown housing. But our study showed that there is actually and was a substantial market for new rental apartments in the downtown. And over the years, that has only been emphasized and substantiated by any studies that we have done since. I think that given the eds and meds situation that you have here, expanding hospital, growing university, and the region is a strong region as well, that I really do feel very strongly that you will continue on an upward trajectory as you have done over the past many, many years.
Sarah, I have a quick question if no one else does. Hi, I'm Marisa. I'm one of the councils here at the agency. And I just had a question. Okay. You mentioned that there were over 10,000 potential people moving either within the area or from outside the area. Or do you have any indication of how much of that is from outside the area and represents like a net growth, and how much is people moving from within the city? Or is
it's about 40%, and that has ranged over time. When we did our initial market study, most of the potential market was households already living in the city. But I also want to point out that it's very important not only to attract new houses to the city, but also to keep households you have or here. And a lot of times people move out because they can't find the housing that they are looking for, particularly in terms of new housing. And that's why it's very important for cities to keep building new and refreshing the city's housing stock. So you have to look at it in terms of both. This is going to maybe persuade many households that might have moved out of the city to stay, as well as attract many new households to the city.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So you said 40% was from the outside of
approximately. Okay. Over time. Yes, it averages about 40%.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sarah, I also have a question. If I can go, hi, this is Joe Better. I'm one of the board members. So do you kind of piggyback on what Marisa said and what you were just talking about? Do you have any idea about the longevity of occupancy in the multifamily rentals and condominiums? And I'm guessing there probably is a difference there, but I don't know.
Oh yeah, no, people live in home ownership units for a much longer period of time than they do in rentals. That's because many households who may not be particularly certain about moving into a neighborhood will choose a rental unit first, because that's the commitment of a 1-year contract as opposed to a 30-year mortgage. So homeowners tend to stay in their units nationally on average between 12 and 15 years. And renters, surprisingly, it's about 2 to 5 years, which is, you think of renters as moving all the time. Well, you have a lot of renters in this city. And there's a whole section of those renters who always like to move to the newest, shiniest rental property. And so you do have a lot of mobility in renters. And that's good because typically what happens is there's this shuffle as people move to other buildings that they might prefer than the one they're living in. But as I said, as long as you keep them within the city, that's no problem. The unit stays filled. And by the way, occupancy rates were quite high. It was surprising. I mean, not every property will give you that information, and those I suspect might be having a struggle. But for most of them, it really seemed like the vacant units they had were due to turnover, and it was vacant while they were renovating the unit for the next occupant.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, Lori, thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you for the presentation.
Oh, you're quite welcome. It was a really fascinating study, and I thank you very much for selecting our firm. We were delighted to be working in Albany again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Here.
I can leave now.
Yes.
Okay, bye everybody.
Stay for the rest of the meeting. Yeah. Thank you.
Great. And while we're just pulling up some materials for this next presentation, I just wanted to introduce Eric Simons from CBRE.
Hello.
Oh, hello.
And Kyle Ruckert's with me as well. Kyle and I worked on this project together, so thank you for having us. It was a many months long project, but I think the finished product is very interesting and detailed enough to get a good picture of the commercial real estate market here in the city. As I mentioned, I'm Eric, this is Kyle. I'll talk first about overall and then mostly the office market. Thank you, Tom. And then Kyle will take a look at our industrial and retail markets. So first is office, and this is the layout table of content. So here's an overview, and I'm sure you probably text is a bit too small, so I'm just going to paraphrase a lot of this. Of course, as we speak, if you have any questions, feel free to jump in. We're happy to take questions. This overview obviously is going to have a lot of the issues of the day, including COVID, inflation, rising interest rates, all the things that are impacting our commercial real estate world right now. The chart on the right, you can see a line chart that jumps up in 2021, 2022. That's showing the national construction costs that have risen more than 14% since the beginning of 2022. And then most of that is driven by our Fed interest rate going from 0.25% up to 4%. Looks like that growth may be slowing down here as they try to put us into a soft landing, but we'll see. The office market as a whole, we look at it, or we broke it down, it's color coded here by different sections of the city. A lot of emphasis was put on downtown here, which is that small yellow piece, obviously, in between the blue, which is the port south end, and then the north warehouse district. But the text on this slide is really talking more about the capital region, because our firm does biannual studies of our office market, and the market we look at as being capital region for office is the 5-county area: Saratoga, Rensselaer, Albany, Schenectady, and Warren counties. So when we study and when I say capital region, those are the markets I'm talking about as a whole. Our market consists of about 31 million total square feet of office space. And I have charts that break down what lies within the city. The next slide gets into our first metric that we generally look at when we're analyzing any market in commercial real estate, which is we want to know what's the inventory, what's the vacancy rate, and what are the asking prices. And when you see asking prices in this chart, you're going to see per square foot per year. That's how things are priced in commercial real estate. So the first slide here deals with inventory, and two things affect inventory: new construction or demolition, and then also conversions, taking a property, as we've seen here in the city quite frequently lately, taking a property that's current use as office and converting it to a residential use. Comes out of the inventory, thus lowers the overall number of inventory. But ground up construction here in the city, we haven't seen much of that. In fact, the last building is 677 Broadway for pure office product. That was 2005. But we have seen some new construction for office, particularly medical office. And predominantly in the city where we've seen that is over by Albany Med, New Scotland Avenue, with those buildings over there. But our vacancy, or our inventory in the city has come down quite a bit over the years. If you could see that chart on the right, the bottom is June of 2012. So that's 10 years, and then as it works up, it's to present day, June 2022. The line represents the total square footage of inventory of office space in the central business district. So it was 5.6 million square feet, and over the 10-year period, it's gone down to 4.5 million. And predominantly what that is we're removing some older dated, what we call Class C office space from the market, converting it to residential use, okay? And that's largely what this graph is represented by, a major decrease in Class C inventory. Let's see here, what else do I want to point out on this slide? I talked about medical office expansion. One of the interesting things is we saw Albany Pharmacy College purchase 150 New Scotland Avenue in the city, which is a life sciences building. And almost at the same time, our company, CBRE, our national firm, produced a report, first of its kind, of a life sciences sector talent report, and ranked the top 25 markets for talent and biosciences in the country. And Albany was actually 24th out of 25, which is very interesting. And there's some stats in there. I don't necessarily need to read them to you, but things like they looked at what's the percentage of the workforce that's in biosciences. We had, let's see, what did they say? And then biochemists, biophysicists, we've increased just in the past 5 years, 35% of our population. Now, again, this is Albany's MSA, so this would include places like Regeneron across the river. And then bioengineers increased by 86% in 5 years. So it's a growing segment of our market, and hopefully will have an impact on the city in the future. The next slide is the conversions. We outlined some of the conversions and plotted them on the map where they've taken place. Not all of those are actually on the map, because when we zoomed out further, it was hard to see where anything was. But as we just saw with the previous presentation, there's been a lot of conversions and new residential units put on the market. These are the ones that impacted predominantly office space. Now that we looked at vacancy, or inventory, excuse me, now we look at central business district office rents. And the chart on the right shows total inventory. So the first line, the bold, Albany CBD total, 4.5 million total square feet of inventory. The next column is vacant, of which, 500,000 is vacant currently, or 12.2%. And then the final column is the asking rate, $19.83 per square foot per year. When we quote rents, asking rents in this report, it's all on what we call a gross basis. So all taxes and operating expenses are included, as well as utilities. So it's a way to put all asking rents on an apples to apples basis. So when we look at this, you see the range and pricing. We break down that total 4.5 million market down by class A, B, and C. Again, A is your newer, higher quality product. Typically, you see it with larger windows, more advanced HVAC systems, maybe security desk, those sort of amenities. And then at the other end of the spectrum would be your class C product, older, dated, some functional obsolescence, floor plates that aren't necessarily easy to reconfigure for different tenants when one moves out to a new one. We can see the asking rents for Class A product are the highest, of course, $22.53. And for B, we drop down to about $18 per square foot. And then C is $14.43 per square foot. And I include in future slides the rest of the capital region market so you can see how it compares to other areas, suburban markets, as well as other downtowns, because we studied Glens Falls, Saratoga Springs, Troy, and Schenectady as well. The rental rates you can see in the bottom of the chart. We went outside of downtown and said, what other parts of the cities are there? And we put all of those in Class A, B, and C as well. And you can see those rental rates. Class A is pretty high, $26.68. But we included some more advanced, I should say, or newer buildings. So, for example, on the nanotech campus, some of that space was put on the market for lease at asking prices up to, I think, $30 a square foot. So it skews the number higher, of course. And this slide is talking about the Class C space itself. We made a note in here. We looked back 10 years. In 2010, we had our highest inventory of Class C space, and it was up to 467,000 total square feet, which is much more than what we have today, which is 174,000. Again, it's showing you, a little over 10 years ago, we decreased our space by more than 60, almost 63%. And that is, again, the conversion to residential. Really our numbers back then, 2010, 12, I often reference 2012 because that was really the peak vacancy rates that we had as a fallout of the Great Recession. We were really what I would consider the market was overbuilt in the CBD for office space. There was way more space than we really needed and what the market could support. So our vacancy rates have come down as we've taken inventory out of the long vacant properties, and it's really corrected the market and put it back into equilibrium. Let's see, and then on the right, this is showing the other municipalities I talked about. You can see Albany CBD, Class A, B, and C. You've seen that on previous slides. And then there's Glens Falls, which is downtown Glens Falls. Saratoga means Saratoga Springs, and then Schenectady and Troy. Below that, it says suburban total, 21.5 million. 2/3 of our office market lies in suburban markets, not these other downtowns. So, and we broke that down by Albany, Rensselaer, Saratoga, and Schenectady. Those are the counties. So you can see how our numbers here in the city compare to asking rates, vacancy rates, and total inventory of the rest of the capital region market. more information on rents, and the coloring is difficult to see, but on the left, the top line is our Class A rents over time, going back to mid-year 2017. And then working your way right to present day, so you can see they went up a bit, and then mid-year 2020, they began coming down a bit to adjust to the market and demand. The middle line, or well, the second one down, I should say, that's our total market, all classes included. So that's a trending line for just office space in general. And then you have Class B, and then the lighter color line on the bottom, of course, is the Class C product, less desirable, commands less rent per square foot. And then on the right, figure 9, this is showing each of those individual markets that we had color coded earlier in the report. The top is the SUNY area, which includes a lot of medical office over there, but also CEFCU's building, CDPHP's over there, I think, as well. So there's some newer product, Patroon Creek area, but also SUNY Nano School, the office space they have on the market as well. So that's why it's high, starting 25 and going up over time. And then you can see the grouping of the rest, Pine Hills, Dunes, Westgate, and the Port. They're all pretty tight together. So the rates, no matter where you go in our individual neighborhoods, are pretty close together. So that was the asking rate section. Now we get to the vacancy, the third main metric that we look at. We give a lot of history here, and this chart on the right goes back to 2018. The light colored line that jumps up in June 19, that is just Class C space. So you can see it went up to 80% vacant in Class C in June of 19, but came down dramatically. And it's not because we had a bunch of new users, office occupants, move into Class C space. Again, there was quite a few buildings that were taken out that year specifically to be converted to residential. So again, it was an oversupply problem that we had with Class C. The vacancy rate pre-pandemic had been coming down since 2012. I mentioned it peaked in 2012 after the Great Recession. Have been coming down steadily. Much of that reduction in vacancy rate, again, had to do with the conversions, but also office users absorbing more space. But that trend reversed itself starting last year, and vacancy has gone up slightly. The interesting one here is when we break down vacancy by class, we see that Class A space is almost a quarter vacant right now as of June 2022 when we last did the study. And Class B is under 10%. So it's an interesting market. Generally, when you see vacancy rates rising, we see it in the lower quality or lower class buildings because we have this, what we call a flight to quality phenomenon, where C users are going into B space because prices are coming down because vacancy is going up, and then B users are going into A space because they can get into them for cheaper than before. And we're not seeing that right now. And really, it has to do with two things. One is, I think, the delta between Class B and Class A office space, which is like $4.50 a square foot. I think it's just too much of a spread right now for B users to justify moving to A space. And another thing that's also happening with a lot of industries, not just ours, but there's a lot of uncertainty of what are we even going to need in the future. You know, do we want to move to newer Class A office space and invest this money into it when we don't really know how this work from home things pan out and what our space needs of the future will be. So those are the two main issues I think that are preventing people from jumping up into the A space right now. One last thing, not to scare everyone, but the last paragraph says, when we look at office leases, generally they are 5-year leases. So, which means we're only halfway through lease expirations since the pandemic started. So if we look at the total 8 million square feet of office space in the city, only 4 million of it's turned over so far. Because on average, leases don't all expire at the same time every same year. So we're probably halfway through seeing what companies are doing as far as, are they renewing leases, are they downsizing, are they expanding to accommodate more space per employee? We just don't know yet. So the future will be very interesting. But I will say, it's my personal belief and many people's belief in our industry, office isn't dead. There's a reason an office was invented to begin with, and there will always be a need for office space, okay? Vacancy, this slide shows when we did a search for office space and see what the results yielded on our local MLS, commercial MLS. There was 215 active listings in the city. Now, that number, when brokers enter space in a building, they may enter 5 different listings, so to speak, for the same building because they have a 2,000 square foot suite available, and then on the 10th floor they have 10,000 square feet. So they list individual suites. So this isn't necessarily 250 active buildings that have space available. It's, there's one on here, like 1365 Washington Ave has 6 listings just for that one address because it's different suites. Okay, but the point of this slide was there's a lot of options available to people, and you saw why the vacancy is so high. Okay, so we went, after we looked at those 3 metrics, then we went into what are the trends that our industry, specifically office sector of our industry is facing. One is office space design. And there's a lot to do with this. A lot of it has to do with the floor plan itself, and they've changed. And some of the older dated C or B buildings can't adapt as readily to the changes due to columns or walls that are load-bearing walls, so you can't easily adapt the space. But the floor plans show an old design, which was we used to have offices around the perimeter and then workstations in the middle. Well, that's been flipped to allow more natural light in, and you have more offices in the middle. But you also have fewer offices and more collaboration spaces and the modern office design as well. So we bring that up because it's an expense. And as you saw with the construction numbers, it can be a big expense to renovate space. So landlords and tenants are both going to have to invest money to create a modern office to lure their employees back, because it's just not enough to provide them with a Keurig machine anymore. They want other amenities like fitness facilities, security is a big one. And security being, I don't know if it necessarily needs a person at a desk in the lobby as security, but whether crime is an issue, whether it's real crime or just people's perception of crime. So better lighting, parking garages, well lit, things like that. Upgrades to HVAC systems to see clean air, better MERV ratings in those systems and things like that. So those are some of the design things, the impact that we're seeing now. The next one is what I'm sure you've all heard about, co-working and flex space. As companies try to figure out what their office space needs, they're utilizing co-working or flex office space more and more. We've seen this industry grow pre-pandemic, and it's only accelerated. We'll get into some of the stats later, but a lot of firms that if they're downsizing their office, they still have some remote workers that want space where they can go to instead of working out of their bedroom. So that's really created a bigger demand. And we looked at the actual co-working operations here in the Central Business District, and listed some of them on the right-hand side, but the real stat is if you look at the total co-working square footage, which is just under 100,000, about 95,000 square feet, that's only 2.13% of the total office market here in downtown. So it is our belief that that could probably go up to 10% over the next several years due to increased demand. But I also think we may see some landlords who are sitting on large blocks of space, a whole floor set, that keep getting inquiries over and over for smaller suites or, you know, shared space, and they may end up converting because that's where the demand is. The demand isn't for 15,000 square feet for a single tenant anymore. Another challenge could be parking, because when you pay for parking, obviously tenants are paying for it, or if a landlord's paying for it, it's affecting the rent, increasing the rent because it's an added cost, and it's affecting the company's bottom line. So when we look at the cost of parking in downtown Albany, we looked at, well, what does it cost? How many spaces do we need? And really, what's that add to the rent? Per square foot, what's it add? Use an example here of a 28,000 square foot tenant who needed 55 parking spaces here downtown. At the current rates and from the Albany Parking Authority's garage, if you lease more than 25, and the rate drops down to its lowest rate of $115 per space per month. When we add that, multiply that by the 55 parking spaces that we needed, it basically was $75,000, or when you take that number divided by the square footage, added $2.66 per square foot to the rent. This becomes critical when you have a tenant, which many times we do, our firm experiences this, where we could be downtown or we could be in the suburbs, maybe Corporate Woods because it's so close to downtown. Well, if you were to go to Corporate Woods, there's seas of parking, of course, because there's plenty of land, and many times it's closer to the building as well. So in Corporate Woods, you don't pay for parking spots. They're included in the base rent, so we don't have this premium, which ends up being in this example, it's about 10% more per square foot downtown when you factor in the parking. Parking alone, all else being equal, rental rate. So that's what this slide is explaining, and then on the right, we took it a step further and said, well, okay, that's the cost of parking in downtown Albany. Well, what's it cost in other competing downtowns, I'll say. In Troy, it's about $75 a square foot for their website. And then in Schenectady, it ranges depending on where you are and who you're leasing it from, but it's, some surface lots at the low end are $42 per month for a space, and they go up to the $77 on other lots. So it's still a bit lower than the current parking costs in downtown Albany. Next are taxes. These are obviously a critical component of a tenant's rent. And when we look at this, we look at two things. What's the rate taxes per $1,000 of value? And then what is the equalization rate? Because that also affects what the total cost is going to be. And on the right, we look at Albany's rate, which is currently $50.63. Schenectady's 41, and the city of Troy was 45. So all pretty close. But sticking with our previous example, if we were to look at Town of Colony office space there, the rate is down to $41 a square foot as opposed to $50, per thousand, 41 versus 50. But when we look at the equalization rate in the Town of Colony, it's 79% as opposed to, 55% as opposed to Albany's 79%. So when you do the math, the rates for per square foot end up being about $3.20 in Albany for taxes, as opposed to a same value building in Town Colony at $1.65 a square foot. Okay. New office leases and rents. We put a few of the transactions we've seen over the last couple of years in the table on the right. And this isn't just central business district. We looked in the other areas as well. So you have Creek, State Street, Columbia Circle, which is the Dunes area. Another one, impact of remote work. I touched on this earlier, but this still has yet to be seen how this is going to turn out. The big sentiment was from the larger corporate office users was post Labor Day 2022, that's when everybody comes back and maybe they have Fridays off or Mondays and Fridays, but they're in the house most of the time. Didn't happen that way. But we did do, our company did do a survey of 100, I think this 175 or 176 of the country's largest office users. So think your Fortune 100, 500 companies. And that survey revealed something very interesting, which was there's a huge difference in what the workers want and what the management wants. And of course, during the pandemic, the labor market had all of the control, but I think that's shifting a bit. And based on what we're seeing in the tech world right now with massive layoffs, I think the power is going to switch back to the management. And I think management, as we're already seeing in a lot of those companies that are doing massive layoffs, they're also bringing people back. Maybe it's not 5 days a week, but it's 3 or 4 days a week. So it'll be interesting to see how that turns out. This is a report, that survey I'm talking about. Next couple pages all has data on that of the varying opinions on it. Let's see, the next one, long-term portfolio planning remains top of mind for companies. This is, again, what are we going to need in the future? And a lot of people are still trying to figure that out. Do we need more or less space? And then the economic outlook, rising unemployment. If that is the result of this recession, if we go into a recession, depending on how bad it is, usually the result of a recession is more unemployment. As unemployment rises, demand for office space decreases, because you have less employees and you don't need as much space to put them in. But this one might be different. According to everything I read, was the labor pool is still so tight that even if we go into a recession, you may not see that much downsizing from these large corporate office users. If that's the case, then it shouldn't affect office demand too much. But we'll see, because it's one of the two always goes in a recession. Your largest expense is labor, your second largest expense is space. So nationally, this paragraph's just talking about what we've seen over the last several months is less users out looking at space in the market. So less activity. Leases are obviously still getting executed. People still need to work, but there's less and less users in the market, which could indicate a lot of short-term extensions, by the way. You know, using the phrase "kick the can down the road." You know, just extend for a year or two, and we'll figure it out then. The future outlook. This is more information on the long-term nature of office leases. And again, we're halfway through period of which those are renewing. Trying to figure out hybrid work, all of those things. And then cap rates. This is a method, when you use capitalization rate, you're trying to put a value on future income stream. And it really depends on how much value you put on the credit of the tenant that is generating that income stream. So, and it's an individual thing as well. So it's very hard to compare one cap rate to another. It's done all the time, but it isn't always apples to apples. So what that triple net lease to McDonald's is worth to me may be less than it's worth to Kyle, because he determines what he thinks that industry is going to do. But when we do look at cap rates, because they are a fairly reliable way to value things, in office, we're generally seeing right now 8.43% to about 10.13% for cap rates. And these are cap rates for credit tenant deals. So if it's a office building with 5 different tenants, they're all credit tenants. They're GE, they're Siemens, they're Microsoft. They're not, a local accounting firm that, what we call mom and pop in the industry. In the industrial market, and I'm going to hand it over to Kyle, but in the industrial market, there's been way more demand for industrial space than office space, which means less risk. So the cap rates are slightly lower on industrial product. And then on retail, it really truly comes down to who the tenant is. Is it Walgreens or McDonald's, or is it a smaller regional chain that may not have the capital or the credit worthiness of the other firms? Okay. Kyle.
So I do want to pause here
Sure.
for a second, given time, but also sort of what we're going to be faced with as an organization going forward. It was really helpful, particularly in the commercial office sector, to really go page by page through the data and understand. Eric had the unappetizing role of not giving us the best news in the world, across our market studies. And we've been talking quite a bit internally about the crisis, the commercial office crisis that's in front of us. And we've known that as an organization and as a city over the past 20 years. That's why we've been doing residential conversions throughout. And as you had heard from Lori, there's still demand there. That is the silver lining of helping us continue that conversion. But we are going to be faced, particularly as an organization at the IDA, on understanding what the commercial office sector is doing, knowing how important that is to the region and to downtown in particular for that daytime population. Really being able to walk page by page through the data and the numbers was helpful to be able to give that. So I do want to pause for questions on commercial office, or Eric, if you had anything else before we get a high level overview of retail and industrial from Kyle.
Okay. I've got nothing further, but I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
The only clarification that I thought was worth mentioning is in that tax section, the delta between the downtown or the city of Albany properties and their tax burden as compared to the suburban communities is borne wholly by the landlord because of the way that office leasing is structured, where, as Eric explained, they're considered gross or modified gross leases. So the tenant isn't responsible for tax burden. It falls wholly on the landlords, as compared to the industrial and retail markets, which are done on triple net basis. So the tenants are paying their proportionate share of taxes.
So another way to say that would be a commercial office landlord may be looking at discounting rents to try to entice new tenants into the building, but that discounted rent, they're not getting a discount on the taxes.
Correct.
And the rents aren't reflecting that, the share of taxes that are responsible for that.
Yeah.
So there's no pass through to the benefit to the landlord on any
Correct.
benefits provided to the tenant.
Yeah, any discount that they can give is what we call on the net rent. What's net to the landlord? Have to pay operating expense, taxes, utilities, janitorial, whatever is in that base rent number. Because then you get down to, here's how much money you have left over to pay. If you have a mortgage, you have to pay a mortgage, and then profit. Sorry, go ahead, Kyle.
No, that's all I have.
Okay.
Anything else on commercial office before we just get a high level? And sorry, Kyle, just time is short, so if you can give us just a high level.
Yeah.
Sorry if I went on a bit.
No, that it's very valuable because we're going to be hit with that quite a bit knowing the nitty gritty is really helpful.
Kyle was expecting that, by the way, because it's the joke in the office. Were you? You were going to say something.
He beat you to it. He beat you to it.
So to be brief, industrial's good, retail's mixed. No, joking aside, I mean, industrial is certainly the shining star of property types, with the exception of multifamily post, financial crisis of 0809. I would say over the last 5 to 7 years, the industrial inventory across the United States has really exploded. And while we have not locally, as a capital region market, seen such strong increases in inventory, we have certainly seen significant reductions in vacancy rates. We have about 67 million square feet of industrial space that we track across the counties we cover, which are the same counties for office space, but we also add Fulton, Montgomery, and Greene counties. In those counties specifically, there's a lot of what we consider big box distribution centers, so 500,000 square feet and up. And of the 67 million square feet, we are 0.7% vacant across the entire market.
Basically, if you're looking for it, you can't find it.
So from the general capital region, we then went down into the Albany County, specifically industrial market. There's about 25.5 million square feet within Albany County, and that also, ironically, is at 0.7% vacancy rate as of the first half of 2022. We should be wrapping up our second half reports a couple weeks shortly, which we could, I guess, add to this as an addendum if it makes sense. So the city of Albany, we do not specifically break out inventory or vacancy statistics for the industrial market, but kind of similar to some of the Class C office space that Eric alluded to, there has been a number of buildings that historically were considered industrial space that have been converted to multifamily. And then there's also been some bar conversions. U-Haul has bought a couple of very large buildings, conversion to storage use. And then obviously there was the other storage use down in the port there that Mark Paquin had done several years ago. So, it's an interesting phenomenon where, it seems counterintuitive that we're so limited on available industrial space and we're converting some of it. But the reality is, for most industrial users in today's marketplace, those buildings are completely functionally obsolete. They're multi-story, they have low ceilings, they don't have the sprinkler requirements, they don't have the loading requirements. So from a highest and best use standpoint, conversion to a different use is really probably the most prudent option. New construction, there's been very little new construction. Part of that is because we have pretty much maximized our industrial land usage, and most municipalities are not creating new industrial land. Within the city of Albany, I know that there is a proposed project over the group that bought the Transworld building in the Corporate Circle Industrial Park. They proposed, I think, 75,000 square feet. I haven't heard anything about that in a while, so I don't know where that is in the approval process. And then there was a building down in the West Albany Industrial Park, which added, I think, 35,000 square feet last year. And that space was pre-leased before it was even finished construction-wise. So it really speaks to the demand that still exists. The chart on the right, this was the entire, within the city of Albany, these were all of the industrial spaces available for lease as of the date of this report. And the reality is, you got under 10,000 square feet for the most part. The 63,000 square feet that was available at 136 Fuller Road, I think that was actually probably, I don't know if the lease was signed yet, but I don't know that they were really actively marketing that space at that point. So there's basically nothing. It's really interesting. So this just kind of highlights a couple of the key leases. The Lasership was the group that took that space at 35 Commerce Ave, which was the expansion that I alluded to a couple minutes ago. From a demand standpoint, ultimately, I think that both local and national trends indicate that industrial demand is going to stay strong. There may be some softening if we do go into a recession of some type, but ultimately, I think it's probably almost as insulated as the multifamily residential market Lori alluded to. So, any questions on industrial?
I do want to just reiterate a point. We get questions, if you are a newer member of council is hoping for interview, you definitely heard the question, why aren't we doing more industrial here at the Industrial Development Agency? And so again, it's the lack of opportunity for space. We have a pretty built out industrial footprint here in Albany. There's very little availability, and that leads, even though there's demand out there, there's very little ability for new industrial projects here in the city. We're trying, but there's not a lot of space available.
Yeah, that's why the Port of Albany got to go buy land in town of Bethlehem. So, but
Zoning issue.
yeah. Any questions on industrial? Okay. Retail, again, kind of similar to the industrial market, we did a larger sort of overview of the capital region, and then obviously utilized the demographics available to us. So we sort of, there are effectively 4 tiers of retail we would consider. One being, like a regional mall, Crossgates or Colony Center. Obviously, with the proximity of those 2 malls to the actual city of Albany, there are no regional malls within the city of Albany. Next type of retail real estate would be a power center. So in this example, Crossgates Commons is considered a power center. Typically, you have 1 or 2 big box anchors, like the Home Depot or the Walmart, and then some of the smaller retail tenants that tend to follow. There are usually out parcels that, like in the case of Crossgates Commons, is obviously McDonald's. Sometimes they can be banks. But ultimately, Crossgates Commons is really the only power center. Home Depot on Central Avenue could be considered a power center, but it really doesn't have sort of the out parcels that the power center traditionally does have. The next tier of retail, if you will, is a neighborhood center, which is typically a grocery anchored retail center. Again, it has a number of co-tenancies that sort of complement that anchor tenant, if you will. And there are several of those, as you can see on the chart here. New construction, again, has been very limited because of sort of the changing dynamics within retail. The only new construction that's really been out there has been hospitality. There's been, a lot of new construction in terms of fast casual eateries, which the city has certainly seen that as well. But from a ground up new construction standpoint, because of how built out the city already is, there's limited opportunities that are out there for developers. So key sites, which ironically several of these were, they must have been under contract at the time that we were doing this report, because they've since closed and some announcements have been made about proposed plans on them. But I think that, to the point I just made, there's limited sites available. So this is a similar chart to the available listings that Eric showed in his office report. There's obviously a lot more retail listings than there are industrial, not quite as many as office, but from a 5-year demand projection, so in the next couple slides, you'll see we used what are considered retail gap analyses, and they look at demographics within a certain target search area, if you will, geographic search area that utilizes both, population and income demographics to look at what type of retail uses are there, where there may be an oversupply of certain uses, and then where there could be a gap in the marketplace, which ultimately should be an opportunity for a developer or a landlord to target certain industries. Yeah, so these are just sort of the overviews.
Yeah, there's lots of demographics in the following pages.
So I think, ultimately, there's been a lot of talk, especially like with the increase in multifamily within certainly the downtown sub-district. There's a lot of talk about food deserts and some of the retail gaps that may exist. And, ultimately, I don't have the answer, Eric doesn't have the answer to this, but I've been thinking a lot recently about how those gaps are going to shift with sort of like the door dashes and the increase in retail grocery deliveries, which that last factor is, we've yet to see it so much in the local capital region market, but when you look at national trends, there's huge demand for cold storage because of the increase in grocery delivery models that are out there.
So to decrease retail demand, increase our already high industrial demand.
Right.
So we need to put the cold storage building back in operation then?
Yeah.
I was just gonna say that. I was literally just gonna say that.
Yeah.
That's the only cold storage we've heard of as a region for a while.
Yes.
There's a new cold storage in town, and so. Exactly. Thank you guys so much for not only the presentation today, but just the work and diving into it. They were really great about going back and forth with staff and trying to drill down to demystify as much as possible for this. I know we're tight on time, but if there are any pressing questions, certainly we can follow up with the CBRTP team as well. And Liz, I know you're following along at home, so thank you for doing that even while you're sick for that. And I'm sure if we've got questions from the chair, we can reach out as well.
Yep, reach out anytime, of course.
Okay.
All right.
Great. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so now I guess we are out of new business. We'll move into other business, and we have.
I will fly through as quickly as possible. Please stop me and ask questions if you have them. I do want to remind everyone that the New York State EDC Economic Development Conference is coming up. We are sponsoring that as an agency. That's going to be March 1st and 2nd here in Albany. We'll get additional details. Registration is open, but if you would like to register for that, please let us know, and we'll register as a group. Shoot an email over. I saw one hand go up, but we'll wait and register everybody all together for that. Speaking of the EDC, we are working with them to keep track of 10 bills that are already under consideration in the legislature. That session has started, obviously, and so we're looking at a number of IDA-specific pieces of legislation, things that we've seen before, also some new things that are kicking around. So we'll keep you up to date on what's happening up the hill. We just heard about our market studies across the board. I hope everyone also saw in the business review recently talking about commercial deals slowing and commercial lenders. So we know that we are facing that as anticipated, and we're seeing the effects of that by having no new applications in some time here at the IDA. We are still working with a number of projects that are trying to get in, and hopefully over the next couple of months we'll start to see those. I do want to report back to that the IDA and Capitalize Albany Corporation staff, as you know, have been working with the council and with the city on the council's proposed inclusionary zoning changes. We were asked to provide testimony in front of the Common Council's Economic Development and Land Use Committee last month, talking through what our market looked like and what the proposal looked like it would do based on the data analysis that we've provided. We did provide that as a council. We do expect that legislation to move forward, and so we're still tracking that. I don't believe that's on the agenda for tonight, but should probably be up again in the next couple of weeks. We announced the big grant at Finance last week. diligently on getting that out there. Last count, it was about 70 pre-applications that have already been submitted. And so Emma's not sleeping. On that. She's been on the phone perpetually with small businesses. Both she and Renee are working through eligibility questions and application questions. The webinar was held yesterday and was wildly successful. Those are up on the website. So as you're interacting with any small businesses, please point them that way. We'll be out and about promoting that program as well as a number of meetings on the calendar there. We do at this point think that we'll probably be oversubscribed even in this first round given the amount of demand, but we haven't seen full applications yet. And then in broader economic development, Capitalize Albany news, we're still waiting news on the South Pearl DRI. We have not heard back from the state on that yet. We are advancing one of the DRI called for projects, the HVCC West project. That's in front of the council this evening for a public hearing. And that, as a reminder, is the proposal for HVCC to locate a satellite campus of the community college at the Lincoln Towers site. We'll, assuming that the council moves forward, we'll have that application in as of 3 p.m. next Friday with HVCC and the Housing Authority. So we're burning midnight oil on that as well. I think that's it for me.
Okay, any questions? All right. Seeing none, thank you very much, Sarah. We can go into compliance update.
We'll have a robust compliance update next month.
All right, thank you very much. And if we have no other business, I'll take a motion for adjournment. Second. All those in favor?
All right.
Thank you very much.